Hello, everyone. This is Rachel Smith with NMOA, and I am hosting this webinar, Energy Efficiency for P2 Planning. We're going to be getting started in a few minutes as we wait for people to join the call, but I just wanted to welcome you today, and I'm going to let you know that this website that we're on right now, you can see my screen, all of the presentations from today will be posted on this website as well as a recording. So if you missed something or have a question for somebody after the fact, you can come right on to this web page and get those materials. And you don't have to worry about, furiously writing down the URL. It will be sent to you via email from the NMOA office. Tomorrow you'll probably get a follow-up email with a link to this site where you can get materials. So today we have 3 speakers, and the purpose for today is to talk about energy efficiency practices for P2 planning and how to use P2 when conducting energy efficiency assessments. Our first speaker is Nick Just from the Minnesota Technical Assistance Program at the University of Minnesota. And he has been providing pollution prevention and energy efficiency practices for Minnesota businesses for about 20 years. And some of the processes and solutions that he has worked on include process heat efficiency and energy management for the primary metals and vehicle maintenance facilities. So he will be our first presenter. Following Nick will be Akita Williamson from the New York State Pollution Prevention Institute. And she's going to talk about some case studies. She's been working with manufacturers to do process modification for material recovery and reuse, design for the environment, life cycle assessment. So she's going to be talking about how these businesses have implemented E2 projects at their facilities. And then our third speaker of the day is Kristen Pierre, and she's with the U.S. EPA. She is going to be highlighting EPA's Economy, Energy, and Environment program, or the E3 program. So she's going to talk about how EPA uses this program to partner with businesses to protect the environment. A few ground rules. We are going to be taking a few questions after each of the speakers today. I suggest that you type your questions in the question box, the chat box, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. And we'll also have time for questions and discussion at the end. So if you prefer to hold your question until after all 3 speakers have presented, that's fine as well. I think with that, we will go ahead and get started today. So hopefully you will enjoy the presentation. And Nick, I'm going to hand over the controls to you. So if you're ready, you can go ahead and get started.
All right. Thank you, Rachel. Are you seeing my first slide?
I can see your slide. It's you're a little bit soft, a little hard to hear.
Okay. Well, we'll see.
Better.
Fix that. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to Rachel Smith and the staff at the association. I'm happy as well as, frankly, humbled to participate today, and I look forward to the audience comments and questions based on your experiences and expertise as well. I represent middle management here at MidCap. I'm a working supervisor with what I characterize as a on-the-ground kind of viewpoint. My assistant's responsibilities, as Rachel mentioned, are the vehicle maintenance and primary metals industry. These are folks that I can identify with because they are typically the folks with the dirty hands. And of course, they represent a spectrum of the topic for discussion today, where in the vehicle maintenance arena, perhaps there's little waste and relatively manageable energy issues from many facilities. And that would be contrast to potentially a lot of waste and some significant energy issues from a small number of primary metal facilities here in Minnesota. So according to the outreach for the presentation today, there are two expectations, and I will try and address both. One is integrating energy efficiency, which I may refer to as E2, into pollution prevention. And then secondly, discussing my experiences, our experiences here in Minnesota, with identifying operational improvements along those lines to be more energy efficient. I want to start with why we have gotten to where we are here in Minnesota at MidCap and how we got there. MidCap really is a classic poster example of a charter member university-based technical assistance program. It was started in the mid-1980s as a small organization, really taking advantage of opportunities, being very pragmatic. There were years with a single director, which lended a lot of cohesiveness to our approach. And our core competencies have since gelled into really the on-site assistance elements listed here, site visits especially, our summer intern program, and our emerging work with facilitating company teams. Also reuse with our materials exchange program, and certainly outreach with various communications tools, some traditional and some new, like social media. You can see by the pie chart that our results stem largely from our current focus areas. Our success is based on the investments in the resources that we decided over the course of the entire history were the most important to look at. We started in the mid-80s focused on managing process waste. The emerging hazardous waste rules from the mid-80s led to the inception of the program, and then legislation developed in the late 80s, early 90s, integrated pollution prevention into that. And all along, we brought in staff that were the right mix for handling those kinds of issues. I feel now, as much as any time, that we are successful in identifying the pulse of Minnesota business concerns, and that in many aspects does have to do with energy efficiency. On top of the business focus on that, there have been recent legislative obligations that the utilities have to look at conservation opportunities, and because of that, look to help their business community get there. So P2, pollution prevention, is, in my estimation, not really conceptually exhausted, however. And if I can digress for a minute, if you think about how P2 relates to a newer topic, but similar, the whole idea of the emerging green chemistry worldview, in that they're talking about high hazard to low hazard chemicals. New chemicals may do the job better, and that harkens back to solvents being replaced by aqueous kinds of chemistries. So we've certainly seen that. New chemistry wants to phase out the bad stuff and phase in the good stuff, and eliminate chemicals altogether during design. So it's really speaking the language of pollution prevention, I feel, with some new terminology. And while that perspective is refreshing, I think there's also a perspective that remains the same. And to illustrate that, I found a link to a meeting that was held by the National Pollution Prevention Roundtable in March and EPA with some of the pollution prevention programs, including the New Mall Association. And among the many notes that were logged, I quote a couple here, that one, that small businesses in particular are most in need of P2 assistance, but are hardest to reach since these businesses don't have the time and resources to invest. And a second comment, it's inherently difficult to measure the benefits of a preventative approach, making it more challenging to determine results based exclusively on P2. Okay, so, and I would maintain that the preventative approach, can also be hard for small and medium businesses to relate to. And I think the challenge of P2 has certainly been an experience that we've seen over the years trying to get businesses to grasp that concept. And so in that sense, we came quickly to appreciate that energy and energy bills may be more tangible these days to businesses. And so that's where our program has moved in the last few years to incorporate those opportunities. So integrating energy efficiency practices, these are some steps that are derived from the Minnesota Pollution Prevention Planning Guide. And it's not unlike what anyone might do to stepwise look at a problem and determine a solution. To get started, use a team to do some brainstorming, develop the baseline information, determine alternatives, and then set up objectives for dealing with those alternatives. And I think energy savings focus areas can really follow that same strategy. In fact, many MidCap teams have, the facilitated company teams have moved from pollution prevention to energy efficiency, or have integrated energy efficiency for a more holistic strategy. So at our program, we concentrate on process energy. We do that because we are familiar with processes. We have the background, the experience with that. It is certainly targeted, and in a manufacturing setting, certainly, although in other settings as well, it's likely the major contributor to the energy load. The utilities that we work with may not have as clear a knowledge base with process information, and so it's an opportunity for us at MidCap to partner with utilities, and then that helps them frame, more succinctly frame their custom rebate programs. And because we concentrate on process, there are a variety of other organizations and partners that have developed the expertise for addressing building envelope issues like lighting and HVAC. So we stick with process assistance because, in essence, that is our mission design. And really, energy efficiency is integral to pollution prevention, my viewpoint. If you look holistically at process, energy reliability, efficiency, or quality, energy quality, is really a fundamental part of how efficient and effective any process is. And for purposes of our discussion today, whether that then has any impact on waste generation. I was trying to think of a very simplistic example. If a work activity, something that we would help to improve, If a work activity was merely sketching designs on paper, for example, if the quality of the lighting or the comfort heating, which are the energy components, if that was inadequate, then in fact there could be waste generation that might otherwise be avoidable. So even the most simple kinds of activities, kinds of business activities, you can broaden your focus and look at how energy is a piece of that. We tend to look at how equipment is used at least as much as the process, at least as much as the equipment itself. A fan, for example, has an operational performance curve, but if the fan is connected to ducting and there's bends and dampers and air contaminants, that's going to modify the system and influence the overall performance. So the system, to be optimized to reduce energy costs, needs to look at the entire scope of the equipment itself and how the equipment is attached and made to provide the ventilation. It's the process viewpoint that is really the needed focus. I'm a big fan of the 5 whys, and in fact, sometimes it ends up being 10 whys or 15 whys to get closer to the root cause of what's going on. And these are, here are some examples. We concentrate also on Department of Energy emphasis areas. And of course, these, by way of being pragmatic, need to be energy intensive. Oftentimes, what we see is a robust infrastructure, but yet it's an aging infrastructure that maybe has old technology. And it was built and installed perhaps when energy costs were not as important. Now that it's up and running and relatively trouble-free, it can be looked on, should not be looked on, but can be looked on as overhead. If you choose to replace something like that, it's going to have very high replacement costs, and that is an obvious barrier in today's economic setting. And oftentimes these are very complex systems as well. Case in point is compressed air. Widely used, inherently inefficient. It's interesting to think that we take one form of energy and convert it to another form of energy and expect the efficiency of work, but that's certainly not the case. Oftentimes it is quite uncontrolled. The workforce can often think of it as a free utility, which of course it's not. And maybe the most obvious and painful part is that it's misused and abused. Typically what I've seen in a compressed air system is that it may be patched together as the business buildings are remodeled or expanded, or as equipment needing compressed air is moved around. So it can be quite the challenge. We also look at process heat. Anytime there is a temperature differential, certainly a significant temperature differential, then there's wasted heat and there's an opportunity there. With fans and pumps, those are oftentimes connected with pollution control equipment, but certainly a necessary part of operations and opportunities for optimization there. And the motors, of course, run the fans and pumps, and they have multiple applications. In a lot of settings, if a motor is on and running, everything's okay. If the motor is not on, then those are potential problems. One point of information I wanted to make sure and communicate this afternoon. In Minnesota, we have a lot of food production facilities that use refrigeration technologies. And the Department of Energy, the Industrial Technology Program, is looking to form an interest group to either get people together that have interest in this particular energy aspect or have resources to share. And so this is the contact information. Again, it will be available after the fact, or if you wanted to do a print screen of this slide now to contact Mr. Evans. I know we are going to be participating in this group and hopefully learning some additional important information about optimizing refrigeration systems. Okay, so here's how we identify opportunities. We analyze the process depending on what the utility is. We try as often as possible to get at least some measurements with data logging. That provides the operational nuances that might not otherwise be identified by mere observation or other kinds of information gathering. And with a data log record, if we are able to implement some improvements, we then have a before and after kind of perspective. And on top of the analysis, we try, or I try certainly, to overlay best practices. Again, if there's any temperature variables, heat recovery may be an option, other kinds of automation, predictive and preventive maintenance, and a classic and good example of this may be leak repair in a compressed air system. Other kinds of standardizations to minimize variables and perhaps closed loop kinds of issues. For example, in a car wash situation, if one could reduce and optimize the water at the vehicle entrance to the car wash, does that then lead to less dilution of the chemistry, the cleaners work better, and perhaps that's a viable scenario for reuse recycling? Another example could be from the food processing industry in a liquid dairy. If you remove the water from product inputs like milk up front, that of course reduces the pumping, heating, and cooling in all subsequent steps. And reduced temperature conversion coatings. If you can turn down or potentially even turn off what otherwise would be a boiler system for a tank, if you're using ambient temperatures, does that then reduce the evaporative loss and help stabilize the process? I'd like to just touch on a couple of examples here. This first one is a project that exemplifies our learning curve in integration. We conducted a number of studies over a variety of high energy user industries, sectors here in Minnesota, and developed essentially a roadmap for the utilities to understand which processes from which sectors have the best potential. And those are the findings we have on that project. A second project conducted by one of my colleagues looked at the metal fabrication industry, a particular grant from EPA Region 5, and we had significant implementation savings, pollution prevention, water savings, as well as energy. And thirdly, an energy efficiency project with support from the Department of Energy and our state energy office where we brought in DOE qualified specialists for training and subsequent assessments. We also partnered with the Industrial Assessment Center at Iowa State, did some training on compressed air, steam, and fans, had over 120 individuals trained, and implementations just on the training resulted in some very significant electricity savings focused on specifically on compressed air. But we also were able to secure and develop 2 of our current intern projects, actually one of which is in progress. And we had a statewide search on that, and are able to then move to a phase 2, which will help to develop those successes further. One of the facilities assessed has developed a team with our assistance, an energy team that meets monthly, and to date they've had a number of successes with implementation. So to wrap up, this is what I see as makes sense. It makes sense for me, it makes sense for our program. If you think about it, motors stir paint, compressors power the spray guns, infrared heaters cure the paint, fans ventilate the paint booth. So if those energy uses are at not peak performance, does the facility reject work? Do they have to rework? Do they have scrap rates? And I guess I feel like this is where MidCap is currently positioned and where we've realized the potential and really continue to integrate the systemic synergies between waste reduction and energy savings. And so with that, I'll close and see if we have time for any questions.
Thanks, Mick. So if you have any questions, you can use the question box that's on the upper right-hand side of your screen. If not, if you're still thinking of your question or feel like you don't have time to formulate it right now, we'll go back to questions at the end for all of the presenters. And then you can see Mick's contact information here, and as he noted, the presentation will be posted on our website, so you can always go back and find this at a later date and send him a question or call. But so I don't see anything in the box yet. So I think we are just going to move ahead with our second presenter, Akita Williamson. So I will, Mick, I'm going to take the controls from you and go ahead and give them to Akita. So Akita, hopefully you are ready. It's about 2:30 right now, so we are right on schedule.
Great. Let me see. So can you see my screen, Rachel?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So we'll get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Akita Williamson. As Rachel mentioned, I'm the director of the New York State Pollution Prevention Institute here in Rochester, New York. We're actually housed at RIT, which is one of the universities here. I'm also research faculty for the Golisano Institute for Sustainability, which is one of the first programs offering a PhD degree in sustainability. So it's a very exciting place to work. I have a few objectives today and not a whole lot of time. So at the end of my presentation, I'm hoping you're more familiar with the Pollution Prevention Institute and some of our goals. I'd really like to introduce the Lean Energy and Environment, the LE2 pilot program that we've run over the last year, and talk to you about what worked, what were some of the challenges, and how we're moving forward with the program. But overall, I found it to be effective and successful. And I'd also like to end with just a few high-level case studies to give you a sense of the type of work that we've done, and if you want any more information on details, of course I can share that with you at a later time. So the overall goal and mission of the Pollution Prevention Institute is to reduce the environmental footprint in New York State. And we really have the luxury to not focus on regulations and compliance and end-of-pipe treatment disposal. We really have the opportunity to focus further upstream in a process, working with industries, manufacturers, really looking at pollution prevention, green engineering, life cycle assessment, sustainability type projects, which is really exciting for us. These are the 5 core programs that you see. I'm not going to focus on all of them, but we do have a broad spectrum of work that we do. We have a lot of partners to help us carry out this overall goal and mission, starting with 4 partner universities that are listed here: Clarkson, RPI, UB, and obviously RIT, where we're housed. This allows us to use this great knowledge base of research and test beds and lab space and expertise for any of our projects. But what I'd like to focus on really for this presentation is the direct assistance program, and that's where we work directly with industries on helping them reduce their costs, reduce their environmental footprint, keep them competitive, and to keep them in New York State. And again, specifically this Lean Energy and Environment program. So when we talk about this big picture for sustainability, I'm sure you're all very familiar with the definition from the Brundtland Commission of how to define sustainability, and we could probably spend most of this call even talking more about this. But really what we do at the Pollution Prevention Institute is we take this broad definition that's typically qualitative, and we really say, okay, how are we going to take this, work with industry, and quantify metrics, results, reductions? So we really do green engineering type work, which entails design for the environment, process optimization, and again, overall reduction in energy, water, and efficient and effective utilization of all our resources is encompassed in this. So what we do is we are statewide, so we work with a wide range of companies, and we have developed this slide because I think it's interesting in where they lie on this sustainability continuum. We have small, medium, and large companies within our scope and mission. So really the LE2 program focuses more on probably companies that are in the middle to high, because on the one end of the spectrum, it's really companies that are just coming into this area of sustainability. They need basic training. We really go after more low-hanging fruit, and we can do that through our direct assistance program. But once you get into companies that have already kind of passed this, they've attacked some of the low-hanging fruit, they need to know what to do next to really make them more competitive. That's where we feel the Lean Energy and Environment program really can be utilized. It's more of a very detailed quantitative analysis. It's a more focused project, and we want to try to get that implementation and impact from these types of projects. So that's the type of companies we try to target for that program, for this program. So why LE2? Where was this business case coming from? I wanted to give you an example that I think kind of set the stage for a very successful project. There's this company, Techmotive, in upstate New York. They've been in business for over 50 years, and they're a small company. They rebuild and remanufacture parts, and you can see this engine part here. And what we focused on specifically was the cylinder process, and you can see that picture on the right-hand side. So we came in and basically decided to do an LE2 before we formalized the program. We looked at lean, we looked at energy, we looked at environment. So at the time, we did this current value stream map of their process, and what we tried to do was identify beyond just the lean opportunities. Where are the high costs when it comes to environmental waste? Where are there opportunities to improve water usage or energy or significant hazardous or solid waste? So you can see in the future state value stream map, the areas that are in green really incorporate more of that EH&S or more environmental energy type opportunities. And you can't see it very clearly, but I'll explain more here. Not to go through the whole assessment and analysis, but kind of to show you what we came across. There were some simple things, and then there were some more complicated things, as with any company. Initially, they were looking at inspecting all of their parts in the back end of the process rather than the front end. We were able to work with them to change that, and it actually made their process much more efficient. They used to be able to load 4 cylinders into their high-pressure washer, and we were able to pilot some different types of programs with them so that they were now able to put in 6 cylinders. which had a huge impact, again, from all the resources standpoint for washing, water, energy, and just efficiency. We were able to increase the temperature in the spray washers so that they could wash more cylinders in the same amount of time. And then this one here, this widening of the orifices in the glass bead blast cabinets, this was not something they were comfortable doing at all on their own. They really needed us to be able to pilot this kind of on our own in one of our laboratories and be able to prove that this really would work and make the process more efficient. So we also were able to completely eliminate one of their cleaning steps. So again, it was almost, we work with companies all the time, and typically a new set of eyes is a good way to go anyway, but by having a core process, looking at 3 core areas that we feel are well integrated, this lean energy and environment, we found that we can really address a lot of factors that make a difference. I'm going to keep going a little bit more here. Again, by that widening of the orifices, you can see that the efficiency from a time standpoint went from 90 minutes to 45 minutes, so pretty significant. We also did cross-training, and it was interesting because at this company, each engineer or technician had their own specific job. There wasn't a lot of cross-training or understanding about the whole process, and by cross-training, we found that they were a lot more efficient on the floor, and they were able to integrate more and share ideas more, and it was overall much more effective. And then, again, the bottom line, which is what's most important for the companies we all work with, you can see these are the reductions. And this is just annual. So, it's going to be continuous. And from an operating cost standpoint, for a small company, it makes a huge difference. And then you can see everything else noted here. Another factor that I think we can't quantify the benefit of is the fact that we even got them started. So now they have a better understanding that there is opportunities here, there is lean, what kind of an assessment should I do when I'm looking for environmental or energy opportunities. And as they continue to make progress, they can do that now more on their own. And I think that is something that we typically don't quantify. It's hard to, but it's an important point. So just check on time here. So overall, this Lean Energy and Environment program, we decided to formalize and actually pilot. So we went for a grant from NYSERDA in New York State. And if you're not from New York State, there's a lot of opportunity right now to utilize National Grid, NYSERDA, utilities to try to get funding for energy-type projects. So it's great timing for us to be working with companies. And something else that I didn't mention early on is that I did mention our partners being the universities, but we're also partnered with the MEPs, the Manufacturing Extended Partnerships. And that is an incredibly important point throughout this whole LE2 program. We're partnered with them anyway as P2I, but with the LE2 program, it was critical to have them involved, and I'll go through why. But overall, if you're not familiar with the MEP network, they're not-for-profit organizations. We have 10 of them located throughout New York State. They are responsible for doing a lot of lean and process efficiency and optimization and cost savings with companies in their region. They have a lot of great relationships that we can leverage to do more of the energy and environmental work. So it's a great partnership, and part of this pilot was to integrate them and train them and help them disseminate the information to other companies, which I think is also incredibly critical because we all only have a set amount of funding that we can use, and it's hard to go one by one by one. So a lot of our mission as P2I and our partnership with the MEPs is to disseminate information and best practices and training and workshops. So the LE2 program, as we came to formalize it, really consisted of us, the P2I staff, and my engineers, the MEP network, and energy consultants. And one of the only reasons we pulled in the energy consultants is, in this case, was when we won the grant from NYSERDA, we had to develop energy solutions that were obviously reducing energy, but also that were innovative or underutilized technology. And because energy consultants are very versed in this area, and we wanted to make sure that we would meet those requirements, we definitely felt it was important to pull them in. So that was our team. And LE2 is not a brainchild of perhaps P2I, in the sense that it was already developed by EPA, in the sense that there was 2 programs, Lean in Environment and Lean in Energy, and so we just kind of went along with what already existed and combined the 3 into one formal program. So again, I'm calling it a pilot. It truly was a pilot. We've learned a lot from the first run of it. And basically, again, what we did is we wanted to work with the MEP network. We worked with the energy consultants, and we had an overall goal to reduce energy, in general, electricity, natural gas, et cetera, reduce the environmental impact for the companies, and increase their productivity and profitability. And again, keeping in mind that they had to be innovative or underutilized technologies. So that was the objective. There were 3 main steps to the LE2 program. The first one is screening, and this one is incredibly important because we knew if we were to be successful, we had to set ourselves up to be as successful as possible from the very beginning. So what we did was we developed this, what we called an LE2 data intake form, and we really wanted to gather information from the companies, anything from the general information to their costs, and if their costs were more proprietary, they weren't willing to share them, at least usage. How much electricity are they using, natural gas, water, what is their solid waste, hazardous waste numbers that they're generating. We wanted to have a sense of how much impact the company would have, and we also asked more about their financial situation, which, in our typical program, we don't find as important, but with this LE2, we wanted to do a very detailed analysis, and our ultimate goal was for them to implement. In order to do that, we have to make sure they have some vested interest, and they're not just looking at this as free money. So again, by screening them up front, it was very helpful. The MEPs were critical in doing this. They helped us with a list of target companies that we both developed. They helped by taking out the LE2 data intake form to the companies, collecting all the data. And actually, when we started this initiative, we only had the energy consultant and the MEP do the initial site visit. And I put challenge here because I think moving forward, we learned that the P2I engineer really needs to be there as well. I think the energy consultant really looked for those energy opportunities. The MEP really looked for lean, and we were kind of left out sometimes in regards to environment. And by being there during the screening, I think it makes a big difference. So that's something we've changed as we move forward with the program, is to have all 3 parties. However, we received a grant and funding was limited, so we did the best that we could. So overall, we did 15 assessments, and so we worked with 15 different companies. And I think that, again, I want to emphasize the significance of the assessment phase. We did not go into a company and do this broad, high-level assessment where we looked at everything from the lights to, whatever we could find and gave them a list of running opportunities. With the LE2, what we found to be the most effective is to narrow the scope. And one of the main points of lean in general is scope creep. And by the larger your scope's getting, the harder it is for you to be able to really narrow it down and get results. So we really follow that philosophy. We want to find the process where there's either the largest cost for the company or the most opportunity for them to make a change, narrow the scope, do the detailed analysis, do mass and energy balances, understand their baseline, and then look for innovative new types of technologies that really focus more on pollution prevention to get their solution. And that's the main philosophy with the assessment. And then finally, there's implementation. And in the pilot, and I think what's working well, again, the MEP had a major role. One of the things we want to make sure we do, and we have to anyway, is to make sure that we can quantify all our changes and the metrics. And that's critical for the work we do with all companies. And we report quarterly to DEC as well. So it's in our vested interest to get companies to implement so we can get those cost savings, environmental savings, any type of job retention or job growth. And then finally, the MEP is really responsible to work with the company to either hold a public demonstration or to put on some type of training or workshop to disseminate that information to other companies in that sector. And again, that's a critical point, I think, in what we're trying to do, because obviously there's proprietary and confidential information for all companies and there's competitors, but I think we can keep it at a high enough level where we can show the type of work that was done without getting into that nitty-gritty data, but by giving them the big picture so they can consider it for themselves, and that's part of the program. Okay, so I think I'm running about 8 more minutes here, maybe 5. So I just want to run you through high level a few of the case studies that came out of the LE2 program. The first one is Hoosier Magnetics. They're a client located in upstate New York. They manufacture powders that are actually then combined with plastics to create magnets that you put on your refrigerator or your car. So they had a process that they've been using for years, and again, I think one of the challenges with some of these smaller companies is that they've already tried to go after the low-hanging fruit, and they're very hesitant to change major technologies, and I don't blame them. I mean, it's a risk. It's different from what they've always been doing, so we have to be able to do that engineering analysis to convince them that this will work, and these are your metrics and your cost savings that you will see. So in this case, they wanted to move away from their current technology, which was highly energy intensive. They had this cooling unit for their process that actually used a significant amount of water. So we wanted to replace what we call the clinker cooling system with an air-cooled fluidized bed system. So we had to model their baseline, understand their current state, be able to model their future state, and show them these potential results. And you can see it's a significant amount of savings when it comes to energy, water, and the payback, which we always make sure we know up front with working with a company, was right in line with what their ROI or payback period was, so 10 months. So this has been a great project. It's currently moving forward towards implementation. We did run into a recent challenge, I can't lie. They were not able to keep on one of their main engineers, so that's been a little bit of a setback, but those are some of the uncontrollable variables that come up. So we are moving forward with this. Gleason is a local company in Rochester, New York. They make gears and gear-making equipment. Again, they were a company that's been around for a long time. They've been doing a lot of the low-hanging fruit. They wanted to see if they could move away from their &co equipment, which I won't get into the details, but it uses a lot of energy. And they wanted to see if they can move towards an alternative technology. And again, we had to be able to look at the different scenarios, the different technologies, and be able to give them something that would work and would make their process more efficient and reduce their energy. And again, keep in mind, innovative or underutilized. So we were able to do that. And in this case, we are implementing, and it's almost complete, with HTR, which is our local MEP, a system that combines RO and ion exchange DI. So again, not to go into the details, but you can see that there is a pretty good savings period here with an appropriate payback. Now, Kraft Walton, I'm sure a lot of you buy their cheese and so on and so forth. We have 3 manufacturing Kraft plants here. We worked with 2 of them, and this is just one of the ones I wanted to bring to your attention. Let me run through this, but in general, the food sector, we found that there is so much opportunity within the food manufacturing sector, and it really blossomed out of this LE2 program. For one, a lot of the companies that wanted to work with us were in the food sector, and 2, we found there was 3 major opportunities. One is water conservation. There's so much water that just comes into food plants and goes out, so there's a huge opportunity there. Energy reduction, and then food waste. And Kraft's a great example of this. So Kraft Walton, we found three opportunities. One, we have had a stumbling block on, and I'll address that first. We worked with the energy consultant. Kraft has a large refrigeration systems. They have to in order to keep their products cool. So one of the opportunities being in upstate New York that's very underutilized, and we are still working on this, is using ambient air or free cooling in order to offset some of those energy. Instead of using just energy for cooling things, you can use the ambient air from outside. And this is, again, highly underutilized. This project, we did all the analysis. Kraft was ready to go. And unfortunately, towards the middle of it, from the middle to the end, as we were working on this project, their payback period changed. So we can't meet their payback. It's about 3.4 years, and I think it moved to much sooner for them, like 2 years. So there's still a corporate decision that needs to be made there in order to implement that technology, but it was proven that it would work, and it would reduce their energy costs and their usage significantly by just using ambient air. So we continued to work with them on more of an environmental reduction, and one was water. As we were walking around the plant, again, we saw there was a huge opportunity to modify some piping around one of their valves and save a significant amount of water. And the other, which I think is really interesting, is food waste. So the food waste that comes from their process is actually high in sugars. And we have a gentleman, a colleague here, that does a lot of work in waste to energy, not waste to incineration, but taking waste and converting it to some form of useful energy, whether it's through anaerobic digestion or converting it to ethanol with fermentation, or taking it and converting it to biofuels if it's high in oil, etc. So in this case, we found that there is a huge opportunity to take their food and ferment it to ethanol and then be able to use a microturbine to convert that to electricity, and rather than sell it back to the grid, for them to use it directly on site. So more of a closed loop system. And we're currently doing the analysis now. It's close to being complete. We're just figuring out the payback period. But if we were able to implement this, I think it would be awesome. So this was great. And like I said, not only Kraft, but there's another example of a food manufacturer, HP Hood.
Hi, everyone. I think we lost Anahita for a moment, so I'm just sending her a message to call back in. In the meantime, if anybody has any questions, now would probably be a good time to enter them into the chat box. And when Anahita gets back on the line, I think you are.
I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. It's like when you're getting an Oscar and someone pulls you off the stage. I was like, oh, I guess I'm done.
No. You have plenty of time, so continue.
Okay, sorry about that. This is, I think, my last slide. So back with this company, I don't know exactly where I left off, but basically they were spending a lot of money on their energy costs and sludge costs. So these companies are functioning like this, again, for years, and these are huge amounts of savings annually. So again, it was, in this case, an opportunity to convert them from using aerobic digestion to anaerobic digestion, which, again, if you look at the very bottom bullet, for about a $750 to $900K investment, which is significant, but they would be able to save about $450K annually. And so really the payback is 2 years. It's very reasonable, and before we do the full conversion, we're actually just starting with some short-term improvements by putting just some drives, variable sensor drives, et cetera, so that they don't have to be operating 100% and using energy 100% of the time. There are opportunities to shut them down, intermittently. So that's basically, I think I'm going to end there. I'm sorry, I can't even. I'm going to end there and just open it up for some questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Anahita. I do have one question, and you may have addressed this a little bit when you talked about the Kraft example. But the question was that you completed LE2 assessments at 15 companies, and did all these companies implement your recommendations, or what were the reasons that they didn't implement your recommendations?
That's a really great question. So we had some money for capital that if it met our requirements of underutilized or innovative, we could utilize some of that capital equipment from NYSERDA to go ahead and help the companies implement. So that was limited funds, and we figured of the 15 assessments that we did, we could help 3 companies move towards implementation. And we did meet that goal. So that would be the Kraft Walton, the Gleason, and the HP Hood. HP Hood, and then there may be one other, which was Hoosier, that is also moving forward. So HP Hood's the one that even if they do or don't, we have met our goal. The other answer, I guess, really is of the 15, at least 10 of them are moving forward, including the ones I just mentioned. Some of them are moving forward without directly involving P2I in the implementation phase. However, we are staying in touch with them monthly to see how their progress is coming. When we get to implementation, there's some projects that really need us to be involved directly. and some that we don't. We can just monitor or support from a higher level. So they can call us whenever they need something, but they can really take it to the implementation, and we can monitor it and collect the metrics. So overall, of the 15, at least 10 are moving forward, and the 3 are definitely moving forward with some of the capital funds that we have, and there may be a 4th as well. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, I think so. That's great. So that was the only question I have so far. So if you're participating, please feel free to continue with the questions. And I'm going to give the controls to our 3rd presenter, Chris Pierre from the US EPA. And we will get back to questions for all presenters at the very end. So Chris, you should be getting a pop-up in a second to start controlling the screen.
Okay, do you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, hold on a second. I need to get rid of something else.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I can do it from up here. The place I need to hit to make it go into the slide presentation is actually being hidden by the GoToWebinar.
If you minimize the GoToWebinar box, don't X out, but if you minimize it, you should be able to see.
Okay. Okay.
Perfect.
So you should be seeing like the full screen now. Is that what everyone else is seeing?
Yep, looks good.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for having me on this webinar. One of the things I think I'm going to do is hopefully give a slightly different perspective than Mick and Anahita have given, because obviously they are technical systems providers, and here at EPA we are not. But what I'm going to talk about is the E3 program, and in some ways which is a culmination of a lot of the lessons learned and sort of pieces that both Anahita and Nick have talked about in terms of looking at integration of resources and integration of issue areas, lean, environment, and energy in a more comprehensive manner to get higher implementation results. So as you see from the bottom of the screen, the E3 program is not an EPA program actually. It's a joint program from EPA, Department of Commerce, Department of Energy, Department of Labor, and the Small Business Administration. And what it basically started off as is sort of a recognition that all 5 agencies have programs specifically focused on manufacturing, and all 5 programs, all 5 agencies with their various programs have traditionally worked and done their work sort of separately in isolation and obviously and not integrated with each other. And as you can see from both Mick and Anahita's presentation, there's a lot of value in the integration of all these some of these expertise, especially on the issue of productivity, energy efficiency, and environmental improvement. One of the things that we realized at the EPA and a lot of the P2 work that we have been doing previously is that while we could always make a business case for pollution prevention, and in a lot of cases a very strong business case, it still had to compete in with other capital investment opportunities within an organization. And sometimes in that competition for capital investment, the P2 projects did not necessarily get the attention or the support that they really should have, or what we felt that they really should have gotten. And we realized also that, depending upon where you are in the country, there are different priorities. If you are in the southeast, you're paying a lot less for energy. You should bet 3 or 4 cents per kilowatt hour versus the northeast, where you're paying anywhere from 10 to 12 cents per hour. That makes a huge difference in the return on the investment and the economic or the business case for energy efficiency projects. And one of the challenges was, how do you create programs or a set of programs that can be sensitive to the environment in which that's placed, whether they're the southeast, northeast, south, the Midwest, or the West Coast, be sensitive to those priorities. Also show the integration of various types of the various types of expertise that can really sort of benefit each other, and leverage all the different aspects that come into consideration when companies are making their decisions with regards to implementation. And so that's how we came up with the E3 program, Economy, Energy, and the Environment. What is E3? It's fundamentally a framework and a model for collaboration. And this collaboration starts with the technical systems providers, collaboration amongst technical systems providers. Anahita mentioned the MEP system, the Manufacturing Extension Partnerships program. And then also there's a lot of there's programs called the Industrial Assessment Centers, which are DOE technical systems providers on energy experts, and they're the small business development centers and the workforce development boards. So the first level of collaboration is actually amongst the technical systems providers. How do we bring these folks, folks like yourself, together with other like-minded providers and saying how do we best help the client? And I think Anahita's presentation was really sort of very indicative of the opportunities and the leveraging that can be gained by bringing different folks with different sort of expertise together around the same problem. Where E3 comes into this is we help develop that collaboration with the providers, but we also then add in the utility companies, local government, and all the various federal resources that are available to manufacturers. As I'm sure all of you probably know, there's very few manufacturers that are, at the end of the day, running around looking for government programs they can take advantage of, nor should they have to. What the E3 program does is provides sort of that bridge, that sort of facilitator to help figure out which programs are going to be most suited for a company, bring them together, and then actually help deliver them in the community. And we designed E3 to be a little bit different than a strictly technical systems program this time. We really said that this needs to be something that the community owns, as well as the manufacturers, as well as the government, as well as the technical systems providers, that we really have an opportunity and an obligation to be reflective of the local conditions that manufacturers are working in, and also to make sure that we are tying into the priorities of the community. And those priorities can be anything from air emissions and climate change to stormwater runoff, or in a lot of cases, communities may own their local water utility, or in some cases even they may own the electrical utility. How can we make sure that the community is as invested as we are in helping manufacturers succeed, and succeed in a way that is greener? So, obviously for what are the benefits for manufacturers? I'm not going to sort of run through this extensively, because a lot of you guys know this work. You know what the opportunities are in terms of cost savings and efficiencies. Demonstrating that sustainability is a profitable business practice. But what we also are looking at, and this is sort of to the greater conversation, is in many ways, energy efficiency, environmental improvement are job creators and job retainers. That there's a conversation that's not being had, that needs to be had, that really looks at and recognizes that the environment and energy really do play a significant role in helping companies stay competitive, and by being competitive to stay to keep hiring and to keep the people that they do have. And one of the other pieces, of course, obviously, is for the manufacturers is access to resources. Again, no one's going, very few people are going online trying to figure out all the various government programs that they need to take advantage of. And from the technical resources that are provided from groups like MidCap and Anahita's organization, there's also a second set of organizations that are there to help companies identify appropriate capital financing and financial products to help them, do skills training and workforce training. So it's bringing all these different sort of pieces together so that there are a multitude of stakeholders who are invested in that manufacturer's success, and they're bringing a multitude of resources from technical to financial to training to the doorstep of the manufacturer, and then providing those resources specifically for them. Obviously, the communities piece of this is one of the reasons that we have been very successful with the E3 program is because of the engagement of the communities. We reach out to city councils, mayor's offices, county commissioners, and work with them and saying, if we're going to put an E3 project in your area, what are the priorities that you want them to address? If we are going to send out, Mick and Anahita out into the world to work with manufacturers, then are there particular issues that you want those manufacturers to focus in on? And that has been incredibly helpful in building stakeholder involvement and building a political support for these types of programs. I'm sure many of you know, there's just not a lot of government money that's going to be, that has been flowing into, especially on the P2 side, but also more generally into technical assistance. And just because of the state of the economy, there really isn't going to be a lot of government money flowing out in out years. So we need to look at other organizations that can be supporters and cheerleaders for these types of programs, who can go to the Hill and say, I want Anahita, I want Mick, coming to the manufacturers in my community and doing the great work that they do. And of course, I think Mick mentioned this, the issue of utilities. Obviously, it's kind of a little bit sort of opposite logic in terms of saying, why would the utilities want to help their ratepayers reduce their energy consumption? But as you all know, there's a lot of legislation right now floating at the state level that is requiring utilities to work to look at energy efficiency and to work with their companies and their ratepayers to help them to identify and adopt a lot of energy efficiency opportunities. What has happened in some states in the past, and some of the utilities have sort of talked to us about this, they have great programs. NYSERDA is obviously one of the very progressive ones, but there's, in Ohio, Michigan, and some of the Carolinas, there are a lot of utilities who are tackling this issue. One of the challenges that they're looking at is that the companies, they will have great rebate programs or implementation support programs. And so a company will come to them saying, hey, I have an energy efficiency project, can you help? And unfortunately, a lot of times companies do what is familiar to them. So they'll say energy efficiency, okay, that means lights. I need to change out my lights, or maybe I need to do different types of insulation. They're really not getting down into the technically sophisticated, process-oriented types of projects that are really probably the big winners when it comes to energy efficiency, because, again, that's just not their capability or their expertise, and they don't necessarily have the capability. Under the E3 program, utilities are part of the stakeholder group that makes up an E3 team. And so as technical systems providers are going out and working with manufacturers, so again, Mick and Anahita are going out and doing this work, then they also are tied very closely with the local utility to say, okay, once you get to the end of the project with the company and you have some energy efficiency opportunities there, you can talk specifically about what the utility programs are that can provide rebates. The utilities benefit because now they're getting more sophisticated projects that are coming in with greater returns, and at the same time the companies are benefiting because they're having somebody to help wade through all that information and kind of figure out what they really need to do and what types of resources they can take advantage of. So like I said, the 5 agencies have brought together specifically, or taken very specific programs within their agencies and sort of said these are the programs that really seem to fit really well. And I'm just going to sort of really quickly sort of walk through sort of what that encompasses. The first part, of course, is obviously the technical assessment. You have to know what a company is, what they're dealing with, what they're trying to address. The lean review, which is obviously comes out of Commerce and the MEP program. The energy assessment comes out of Department of Energy and their industrial assessment centers. The environmental clean review and the greenhouse gas evaluation comes out of EPA and a lot of our P2 practitioners out in the field. All these elements, very similar to the work that Anahita just referenced, are combined into one technical assessment, one assessment that says, here are all the different types of information opportunities that you can take advantage of. One thing that we are learning from this work is that by adding in the environment and energy into a lean review, into any sort of productivity improvement opportunity, that you're actually adding about 40% more in cost savings. And we have some data from previous programs that really sort of highlights that. And again, another reason that, or another sort of piece of evidence supporting that environment and energy are and can be strong business drivers. One of the things that in the conversations that we talk to companies about, like if they're, especially if they have done lean, they're very familiar with lean, is that if you're only doing lean, as lean is traditionally defined, then you're leaving money on the table. And in fact, you're leaving probably about anywhere between 40 to 50% on the table, and that's not good. But as I'm sure all of you have experience with, doing an assessment, providing a technical solution is only sort of half the battle. A lot of times a company will come back and say, that's great, that's wonderful, but I don't have the money, or I don't have the people to really implement these recommendations. So that is sort of where we bring in the other agencies. The Small Business Development Centers, and through their as representative of SBA, they provide a lot of counseling, sort of post-assessment counseling, to say, okay, if one of your recommendations was to look at right-sizing your motors, and that requires buying new motors, let's look at your financing options. Let's build the strong case to your bank that says this is a good investment for your financial provider. And what they also do is, and this is something that we've learned from the E3 program in the pilot stage, is that not every company is financially stable. And not every company is really ready for the very intense technical assessments that are done by technical systems providers. And one of the things that SBDCs do and can do, and in the E3 program, is to do a quick screen of a company to figure out if they're financially stable enough. If you think about it from this perspective, if you're going to go out and work with manufacturers and you have a grant or you have resources available to you to allow that to happen, and you go into a company and you do a lot of really great work, and at the end of it the company says, well, this is wonderful, this is great, but we're actually 6 months away from closing our doors, for other reasons, or we don't have enough cash on hand to implement anything. That really wasn't the best use of your dollars. It wasn't the best use of federal grant dollars. So what the SBDCs are doing under the E3 program is doing a quick screen to see if that company is financially stable enough to go through that type of investment of grant dollars and time and effort. And if they are, great. Then again, it's Mick and Anahitas of the world that will go in and do amazing work with them, knowing that the company is there for the long haul, knowing that they have the resources to implement once the assessment is over. If the company is not financially stable enough, then they can work with their Small Business Development Center or sort of one-on-one to get themselves to the point where they are more stable, and then they can go back to the program at that point. The Workforce Investment Boards, again, one of the challenges that companies can say, well, maybe it's not the money that I'm lacking, but maybe it's the people, or the recommendations is saying you need this new piece of equipment, but my people really don't know how to use that new piece of technology, or we're not familiar with it, or what we really need is the capacity to do some of this work ourselves. To me, it's great it's in technical assistance providers, but I think we all would agree that the bigger objective is to how do we help companies do this work themselves? How do we build in-house capacity, teach to fish, as to say. So the Department of Labor and their workforce investment boards, that's what they do. There's a lot of training dollars out there on, we don't really talk about green jobs in the E3 program. We talk more about green skills. We talk about the skills and the training that you can provide on site to manufacturers and their line workers, their machine operators, their plant managers on how to do an energy audit, how to do a basic P2 audit, how to look at or use some of the DOE energy tools on a continuous basis. Again, this may not necessarily make them an expert, but at least will give them a baseline set of skills that they can then use and take and continue the work that that the E3 assessors and the technical systems providers have already started for them. And sort of skip. So some of the metrics that we collect through E3, and this is still obviously an evolving program, it's a very new program, but these are types of metrics that we're looking to collect through the program. And one of the reasons that we're trying to do this is obviously because each agency has its own sort of buckets that they have to fill in our report to Congress, but there's a broader conversation here. And the broader conversation, so we're trying to demonstrate, or at least we're trying to see if we can demonstrate, is do we get higher implementation rates if these agencies work together and leverage each other's resources than if we do things alone? Do we get higher, larger air emission reductions, solid waste reductions on the environmental side, bigger energy conservation, carbon reductions, if we are working together for integrating all these different pieces together? Is this a better use of federal dollars? And so far, again, it's a brand new program, so most of our evidence is anecdotal, but so far what we're hearing back is that yes, it is. That the integration of energy, environment, P2, and lean productivity, financing, training does have higher implementation results and does get better metrics than would each agency do all this work on their own thing on their own. So where is E3 today? And I probably need to give you a little bit of history. The E3 program started officially, our very first post-pilot E3 program started May of 2010. So we were really barely even a year old. And in that time, since the first one, which was Alabama, came on board, as you can see, all the blue states, think about 8 or 9 blue states, have E3 programs in place, or they're up, they're running, and they're funded. So they have identified the appropriate funding, they've identified the appropriate resources, and actually the E3 program, myself and my counterparts at the other agencies, we help facilitate identifying the resources, making the introductions, setting up the partnerships, providing the framework, and even in some cases identifying different grant programs that are that can be tapped into. But again, and as you can see, the blue states are the ones that just in a year have gotten E3s up running and are doing work. And actually now I think we need to color the state of New York blue as well, because I know that New York is actually has started one E3 project in Tonawanda, of which the RTI is part of, and of course I think there's another one getting started in Rochester, sorry, I was going to say Buffalo, Rochester, New York. And again, bringing all these different groups together. And the green states are where folks have heard about E3, liked the idea, and have asked us to come in and help them identify and help them set up an E3 project. So the green states are where we're kind of working with the different partners and helping them get themselves set up and implemented. I'm going to give you a quick example of sort of E3 on the ground, and this is North Carolina, and where you had the 5 federal agencies. They have brought together, obviously a similarly coordinated group of agencies specific to North Carolina. I won't go through all the different acronyms. But you can kind of see, again, it's that concept of at the federal side, the coordination at the federal level, but then also that same coordination and collaboration down at the local level. And one of the things that we've done with the E3 program is we've built in a lot of flexibility, again, specific to the community and the community's issues, challenges, and priorities. There's a lot of flexibility to customize E3 to meet those needs. So, for example, in North Carolina, they took the basic E3 sort of technical assistance requirements, which are lean and green review, energy review, greenhouse gas emissions, and they've added 2 pieces. So they've added a business excellence assessment, which is being provided from their Small Business Development Center. Basically, that assessment is this business well run? Despite all the technical issues and the technical challenges and the technical solutions, is this a well-run business? Do they have the right financial plan? Do they have the right management policies? Are they in it for the long haul? And if not, how do we help them become stronger? And also, they have worked with their state OSHA office to bring in a worker safety review. Again, looking at sort of the social aspects of any sort of sustainability effort and saying, here's the technical solution, here's the solid business and financial solutions. Let's look at worker safety and add that into as a component of E3. And again, under this program, there is that flexibility to customize the program specific to the needs of the community or services that are out there in that area or region of the country that can be incorporated. When we did the pilot in 2009, we did it in Columbus, Ohio. We started with 6 different companies. And this was, again, just kind of testing out a lot of the concepts that Mick and Anahita have already sort of talked about is, can we bring these pieces together, lean, environment, and energy? And as you can see, what was really sort of fascinating for us was the fact that when you do bring those pieces together, that the environment and energy savings almost dwarf the lean savings. And just kind of pointing out, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit with regards to energy and environment, and not just for small companies who've never done this sort of stuff, but for larger companies like the Pepsi bottling company. ArcelorMittal is a very large, major multinational corporation. So there's still opportunities, no matter which size industry or company that you look at. And these dates are actually these numbers are actually a lot out of date now, maybe a year out of date. But of the savings that we identified in the several million for these 6 companies, at the time, I think a year post their assessment, 660,000 of those projects have been implemented. And specifically, we heard back from one of the companies that they were able to retain 5 jobs they were anticipating they were going to have to get rid of because of sort of the recession and the economic downturn. One thing, these results are actually from our pilot in Texas, and this is a really interesting sort of concept. As you can see, they've done a number of E3 projects, and you'll see the ones are highlighted in sort of that greenish color, where you had 100% implementation of all the recommendations that were given to that company. Now, I don't know for a number of you, but for a lot of us, complete 100% implementation results from a manufacturer is really, really unusual in the technical assistance field. What they were able to do in this E3 project is they set up an agreement with their local utility. So the cost of the E3 assessment to a manufacturer is about $5,000 in terms of the company had to pay out of pocket. That was not the value of what was provided to the company, but it's what their contribution was. The local utility said that, and it was able to set up an agreement that said, if a company implements like 60 or 70% of the recommended implementation projects, that the utility would rebate back to the manufacturer the original cost of investment of $5,000. So if you think about this, if you're a manufacturer and you're being sort of positioned to kind of take advantage of an E3 assessment, and you have to pay $5,000 for it up front, but you know that, hey, if I implement all the things that this company, or that all the things are, at least 60 or 70% of the recommendations that come out of this assessment, I can give back my original $5,000. And again, what that did is it became a huge incentive for companies to do the implementation, to follow through, and to follow through on a relatively rapid sort of cycle. So again, obviously these companies are in different stages of implementation, but it was sort of one of those unique and creative ideas that came from a local E3 project that really seems to work, and it seems to boost those implementation numbers up significantly. So this is, like I said, it's not an EPA program. It's a collaborative amongst all the different agencies. So these are sort of my counterparts across the federal system. And if anyone's interested in either establishing an E3 project or working on seeing what that would involve, you can contact me, but you also can contact any of these other organizations as well. So I will stop there.
Thanks, Chris. So we have about 5 minutes left of today's webinar, and I have a question here. The person wants to know if they can get a copy of what is required in an E3 audit or an example statement of work. Are those available?
We don't have example statements of work in terms, and I don't know that they mean like a statement of work in terms of like from a grant perspective, or do they mean in terms of what actually happens on the ground?
SOW. Let me see if I can unmute the person that asked the question. Bonnie, I've unmuted you. Oh, you want to know if it's on the ground.
Oh, on the ground, the technical, that's actually, we can give you examples of what E3s have done, but since each E3 is customized for that particular project or that particular state or location, there's going to be a little bit of difference because how they do the work will be reflective of the partners that they have and the resources that they are sort of tapping into. But the basic statement of work or basic services that have to be provided are a lean or sort of a lean value stream map, which is combined with an environmental for a particular size. Depending on the size of the facility, it can be the entire facility or it can be a part of the facility, and also a greenhouse gas footprint, which is provided through EPA through Climate Leaders Program. And we will train folks on how to use that tool and then how to apply that tool.
Okay. Okay, great. So I just want to turn everybody's attention back to the website where these presentations will be posted, probably by the end of the week. So Friday or early next week, everything should be up here. I want to thank all of our presenters, Nick, Anahita, and Chris. I think this was a really great webinar, and hopefully, everybody got something out of it. So again, I know it's a nice summer day, so thanks for presenting and thanks for participating, and we'll see you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.